During holiday dinner, my 5-year-old announced, "My teacher says the bruises mean I'm learning." My daughter Emma said it while reaching for the mashed potatoes, her voice casual like she was talking about the weather. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. My mother went silent. My husband Jake looked at me with wide eyes. I asked Emma what she meant by that, keeping my voice calm even though my heart was pounding. She shrugged and said her teacher, Miss Patty, told them that when they get bruises during learning time, it means their bodies are getting smarter. She said it like it was the most normal thing in the world, then asked if she could have more gravy. I looked at my husband. He looked at me. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. My mother excused herself to the kitchen, but I could see her hands shaking as she picked up her plate. After dinner, I sat Emma down in her room and asked her to show me where her bruises were. She pulled up her sleeves and showed me small marks on her upper arms. Then she lifted her shirt and there were more on her back. My stomach dropped. I asked how she got them, and she said learning time. I asked what learning time meant, and she went quiet. She said Miss Patty told them they weren't supposed to talk about learning time because it was a special secret just for her class. Only the kids who were really good at learning got to do it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept looking at the photos I'd taken of Emma's bruises. They weren't random. They were in specific spots, hidden spots, places that clothes would cover. The next morning, I called the preschool and asked to speak with the director. I explained what Emma had said and asked about this learning time activity. The director sounded confused. She said there was no activity called learning time in any classroom and that she'd look into it immediately. An hour later, she called back. Her voice was different now, careful. She said she'd spoken with Miss Patty, who explained that learning time was just a creative name for their regular morning circle activities. She said some children bruise easily during normal play and that Emma might be exaggerating things the way kids do. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but something felt wrong. I started picking Emma up early from school, watching through the window before going inside. The classroom looked normal. Kids playing, singing songs, doing crafts. Miss Patty smiled and waved at parents. Everything seemed fine. But Emma started changing. She'd get quiet in the car on the way to school. She stopped wanting to wear her favorite purple shirt because she said Miss Patty didn't like purple. She started flinching when I touched her shoulders. I asked other parents if their kids had mentioned learning time. Most looked at me like I was crazy. But one mom, a woman named Rachel, pulled me aside in the parking lot. She said her son Marcus had been having nightmares about a dark room. When she asked him about it, he said it was where kids went when they didn't learn fast enough. Rachel and I started comparing notes. Her son had bruises too. So did another boy whose grandmother had complained to the school last month. That grandmother had been told her grandson was clumsy and fell during recess. I requested to see the classroom security footage. The director said cameras were only in hallways, not classrooms, for privacy reasons. I asked for Emma's daily activity logs. They were vague. Circle time, free play, snack, nothing called learning time anywhere. Then I found the closet. I'd come to pick up Emma early one day and walked past Miss Patty's classroom. The door was slightly open, and I heard her voice, sharp and cold. Nothing like the sweet tone she used with parents. She was telling someone to stay quiet or they'd have to do it again. I pushed the door open. The classroom was empty, except for Miss Patty, standing near a supply closet in the back. She spun around when she saw me, her face shifting instantly from anger to a bright smile. She said Emma was in the bathroom and would be right out. I looked at the closet door. There was a lock on the outside, a padlock, on a supply closet in a preschool classroom. That night, I filed a police report. The officer was kind, but explained that without concrete evidence, there wasn't much they could do. Bruises on a 5-year-old could be explained a dozen ways. A teacher's word against a child's rarely went anywhere. But then Rachel called me at 11 at night. Her voice was shaking. She said Marcus had finally told her what happened during learning time. He described a small dark room where kids had to sit perfectly still. If they moved or cried, Miss Patty would grab their arms and squeeze until they stopped. He said the bruises meant they were learning to be quiet. I drove to the school at 6 in the morning before anyone arrived. I needed to see inside that closet. The parking lot was empty and the building was locked, but I knew the side door by the cafeteria had a broken latch. I walked through the dark hallways with my phone flashlight until I reached Miss Patty's classroom. The padlock was still on the closet. I pulled out the bolt cutters I'd brought from my garage. The lock snapped off. I opened the door, and what I saw inside made me understand exactly what had been happening to my daughter. The rest of the story is on my channel or linked below. The closet is tiny, maybe 4 feet by 6 feet, but it's been transformed into something horrific. A child-sized chair sits bolted to the floor in the center, with small restraints attached to the armrests. There's a camera on a tripod pointed directly at the chair, and a digital recorder sits on a small table beside it. The walls are soundproofed with foam panels, and a bright light hangs overhead. No windows, no escape. My hands shake as I pull out my phone and start taking pictures of everything. In the corner, there's a filing cabinet. I yank it open, and my stomach drops. Inside are folders labeled with children's names. Emma's is there. So is Marcus's. I flip through Emma's folder and find photographs, dozens of them, documenting bruises on her arms, legs, and back, dated over the past several months. Each photo has notes written on the back in neat handwriting. 5 minutes for talking during story time, 8 minutes for crying, 10 minutes for asking to use bathroom twice. So the bottom drawer of the cabinet holds what looks like a teacher's planner, but instead of lesson plans, it contains a detailed punishment system. Noisy Learner's Protocol is written across the top page in the same neat handwriting. It outlines escalating punishments based on infractions, with specific instructions for how to hold children to prevent them from moving without leaving visible marks. There are notes about which children respond well to different techniques. My hands are trembling so badly I can barely dial 911. The dispatcher answers, and I try to keep my voice steady as I explain explain what I found. She tells me officers are on their way and to stay on the line. I step out of the closet, unable to bear being in that space any longer, but I keep taking pictures of everything. They'll be there in minutes, the dispatcher assures me. Is anyone else in the building? I don't think so, I say. It's early. School doesn't start for another hour. I hear the sound of a door opening down the hall. Footsteps. Someone's coming. I whisper to the dispatcher that someone's entered the building, and she tells me to hide if I can. I duck behind Miss Patty's desk just as she walks into the classroom. She's humming to herself, setting down her coffee and tote bag on her desk. She freezes when she notices the broken padlock on the floor by the closet door. I hear sirens in the distance, growing louder. Miss Patty hears them too. She looks at the open closet, then at the broken lock, and her face transforms from confusion to panic. She grabs her bag and turns to run, but stops dead in her tracks when she sees me standing up from behind her desk, phone still recording. What have you done? She whispers, her voice nothing like the sweet tone she uses with parents. The sirens are right outside now. Miss Patty bolts for the door, but I'm faster. I block her way, using my body as a barrier. You're not going anywhere, I say, my voice shaking with rage. Not after what you did to my daughter, to all those children. She tries to push past me, but I stand my ground. The classroom door bursts open, and 2 police officers rush in. Miss Patty backs away, her hands raised in surrender, but her eyes are cold and calculating. She broke into my classroom, Miss Patty says immediately, pointing at me. She's vandalizing school property. Check the closet, I tell the officers, my voice steadier now. Look at what she's been doing to the children. One officer stays with Miss Patty while the other goes to investigate the closet. His face hardens as he takes in the scene. He calls his partner over, and they exchange a look I can't interpret. The first officer handcuffs Miss Patty while reading her rights. She doesn't resist, but her eyes never leave mine. This is all a misunderstanding, she says calmly to the officers. I use that room for children who need quiet time. The restraints are for safety. The officer escorting her out doesn't respond. More police arrive, along with someone who identifies herself as a crime scene investigator. I call Jake, who says he'll pick up Emma and come straight to the school. My voice breaks when I tell him what I found. Is she okay? He asks immediately. She will be, I promise, though I don't know if that's true. By the time Jake arrives with Emma, the school is swarming with police and school administrators. The principal looks shell-shocked as officers carry evidence boxes from Miss Patty's classroom. Jake wraps his arms around me, and Emma clings to his leg, watching everything with wide eyes. Mommy, why are the police here? Emma asks. Is Miss Patty in trouble? I kneel down to her level. Yes, sweetie. Miss Patty did some very bad things, and she's in trouble for that, but you're safe now. A gentle-voiced woman approaches us and introduces herself as Diane from Child Protective Services. She asks if she can talk with Emma somewhere quiet. Jake goes with them to the school library, while I continue answering questions for the police. Other teachers are arriving now, staring in disbelief at the scene. One of them, a young woman named Miss Taylor, pulls me aside. I knew something wasn't right, she whispers. I heard crying coming from her room during lunch breaks sometimes, but when I asked, she always had an explanation. I should have pushed harder. Why didn't you report it? I ask, not bothering to hide my anger. I did, she says, her eyes filling with tears. 3 months ago. The principal said he'd look into it, but then told me Miss Patty had been teaching for 20 years with an exemplary record. He suggested I was overreacting. More parents begin arriving as news spreads. Rachel finds me in the hallway and hugs me fiercely. They found Marcus's file, she says, her voice breaking. Photos of him, dates, everything. The school superintendent arrives, ashen-faced, and announces that the principal has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. He stammers through a statement about taking this matter extremely seriously and promises full cooperation with authorities. By afternoon, the school board has called an emergency meeting. Parents pack the district office, demanding answers. How could this happen? Who knew what? How long had it been going on? That night, Emma has nightmares. She crawls into our bed around midnight, her little body trembling. Was learning time bad? She asks in a small voice. I pull her close, fighting back tears. Yes, sweetheart, it was very bad, but you were so brave to tell us about it. Will Miss Patty come back? No, I promise her. She will never hurt you or any other child again. As Emma finally drifts back to sleep between Jake and me, I stare at the ceiling, thinking about all those children, the folders, the photographs, the meticulous records of abuse spanning years. I think about the principal who ignored warnings and the system that failed to protect the most vulnerable. Tomorrow, there will be more questions, more revelations, but tonight, I hold my daughter close and silently vow that this is just the beginning. Miss Patty's reign of terror is over, but the fight for justice has only just begun. The news breaks the morning after Miss Patty's arrest. I'm making coffee when Jake calls me over to the living room where the TV is on. The local news anchor's voice is grave as the headline scrolls across the bottom of the screen. Preschool teacher arrested for child abuse. Police say Patrice Holloway, known to students as Miss Patty, maintained what investigators are calling a punishment room within her classroom at Sunshine Valley Preschool. The anchor reports, authorities discovered restraints, recording equipment, and extensive documentation of abuse dating back several years. Jake mutes the TV as Emma walks into the room, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She climbs onto my lap, and I hold her a little tighter than usual. Mommy, can I stay home today? She asks, her voice small. Of course, sweetie, I tell her, stroking her hair. You don't have to go back to that school if you don't want to. Ever? She asks hopefully. Jake and I exchange a look over her head. We'll find you a new school, he promises. A good one where teachers are nice all the time. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing since the story broke. Parents from Emma's class, parents I've barely spoken to before, all reaching out with similar stories. Bruises that appeared without explanation. Children who suddenly became fearful of school. Behavioral changes that seem to come out of nowhere. Rachel calls around noon. Have you seen the news? We're trying to keep it off while Emma's awake, I tell her, stepping onto the back porch so I can talk freely. How's Marcus doing? He had nightmares all night, she says, her voice cracking. Kept talking about the dark room and Miss Patty hurting him. She breaks off and I can hear her trying to compose herself. I'm organizing a meeting for all the parents tomorrow night at my house. Can you come? Absolutely, I promise. That afternoon, I sit at my laptop while Emma naps, digging into Miss Patty's background. It takes some searching, but I finally find what I'm looking for. 3 years ago, she taught at a preschool in Westfield, about 40 miles away. She left abruptly mid-year. The school's website simply lists her as no longer with us, but a deep dive into local news archives reveals a small article about a teacher who resigned amid unspecified concerns raised by parents. I print everything I find and add it to a growing file. When I call the Westfield school, the receptionist immediately transfers me to their lawyer when I mention Miss Patty's name. The attorney refuses to comment on personnel matters, but his carefully measured tone tells me everything I need to know. That night, Emma wakes up screaming around 2 a.m. I rush to her room to find her tangled in her sheets, her face wet with tears. She's coming to get me, she sobs as I gather her into my arms. Miss Patty said if I told anyone about learning time, she would come to my house and take me away forever. She can't hurt you anymore, I whisper, rocking her gently. She's in jail, and she's going to stay there for a very long time. Promise? Emma asks, her little fingers digging into my arms. I promise, I say firmly, though my heart is racing with fury. How dare that woman terrorize my child this way? The next evening, Rachel's living room is packed with parents. Some are crying, others look shell-shocked, and a few appear angry enough to tear down walls with their bare hands. Rachel has organized everything meticulously. There are folders for each family containing resources for child therapists, legal information, and contact details for victim advocates. The school is already trying to distance itself, Rachel tells the group. They released a statement today claiming they had no knowledge of Miss Patty's actions, despite documented complaints from at least 3 families. A woman I don't recognize raises her hand. My son came home with bruises in February. I emailed the principal twice and never got a response. When I finally cornered him in person, he said children get bruises from normal play and suggested my son was clumsy. Similar stories emerge from around the room. One by one, parents describe raising concerns only to be dismissed, gaslit, or ignored entirely. They knew, a father says, his voice shaking with rage. They had to know. This wasn't just one incident. This was systematic abuse happening right under their noses for years. We form a parent advocacy group that night, with Rachel as our leader. We share contact information for lawyers, create a system for updating each other on developments, and promise to stand together no matter what pressure the school district might apply. Emma's first therapy session is the following week. The therapist, Dr. Landry, specializes in childhood trauma. She has a gentle voice and an office filled with toys and art supplies. Emma is hesitant at first, but eventually warms up when Dr. Landry asks if she'd like to draw. Can you draw what learning time looked like? Dr. Landry suggests, placing crayons and paper in front of Emma. I watch as my daughter slowly creates an image that makes my stomach turn. A small, dark room with a chair in the middle, a stick figure with tears streaming down its face, and a larger figure standing nearby. The larger figure has an angry red scribble for a mouth. That's Miss Patty, Emma explains, pointing to the large figure. She gets mad when kids make noise. She says noise hurts her ears and makes her have to teach us to be quiet. Dr. Landry handles the session beautifully, letting Emma talk at her own pace while gently gathering information. When Emma goes to play with some toys in the corner, Dr. Landry turns to me. She's exhibiting classic signs of trauma, she says quietly. But children are resilient. With consistent support and therapy, she has every chance of recovering fully. I want to believe her. But that night when I find Emma hiding in her closet because it feels safer than being in the open, I wonder how long the road to recovery will truly be. The first note appears in our mailbox 3 days later. Plain white paper, typed message, liars destroy lives. Stop now or face consequences. I show it to Jake, who immediately calls the police. They take the note but tell us there's little they can do without more concrete threats. The next day, Rachel calls in a panic. Did you get one too? She asks. A threatening note? Yes, yesterday. Mine came this morning, she says, and Marcus's grandmother got one too. We compare notes and realize several families from our support group have received similar messages. The police take more interest when they realize the scope, but still can't offer much beyond increased patrols in our neighborhoods. 2 nights later, I'm awakened by the sound of breaking glass. Jake is already out of bed, rushing to Emma's room. I follow, heart pounding, and find him holding our daughter, who's thankfully still asleep. The sound came from downstairs. In the living room, we find a brick on the floor, surrounded by shattered glass from our front window. There's a note attached. Next time it won't be a window. Jake installs security cameras the next day at every entrance, covering the yard, the driveway, everywhere. He takes 2 weeks off work to stay home with Emma, while I attend meetings with lawyers and other parents. The school district's lawyers reach out to several families individually, offering settlements that come with strict non-disclosure agreements. They're trying to divide us, to silence us one by one. They offered us $50,000. One mother tells me tearfully at our next support group meeting, my husband wants to take it. We need the money for our son's therapy, and he says fighting the district could take years. That's exactly what they want, Rachel says firmly. They're hoping to pick us off one by one until there's no one left to speak out. I understand the temptation. The legal road ahead looks long and difficult, but when I think about that closet, about the photos of bruised children carefully documented over years, about Emma hiding in her closet at night, I know we can't back down. We stay together? I tell the group. If we accept these settlements and sign NDAs, Miss Patty might be punished, but the system that enabled her will continue. The next Miss Patty will find another classroom, another closet, another group of vulnerable children. That night, as I tuck Emma into bed, she asks a question that breaks my heart. Mommy, why did Miss Patty hurt us? Were we bad kids? I gather her close, fighting back tears. No, sweetheart, you were never bad. Miss Patty was the bad one. She hurt children because something is wrong with her, not with you. Emma thinks about this for a moment. Will I have to see her again? No, I promise. But someday, you might need to tell a judge what happened. Would you be brave enough to do that? If it means Miss Patty can't hurt any more children? Emma is quiet for so long, I think she's fallen asleep. Then she whispers, I think I could be brave like that. As I watch my daughter finally drift off to sleep, I know that no matter what threats come our way, broken windows, intimidating notes, pressure from lawyers, we won't back down. This fight isn't just for Emma anymore. It's for every child who's ever been silenced, every complaint that's been dismissed, every adult who looked the other way. The road ahead will be hard, but we're not walking it alone, and that makes all the difference. The morning of the preliminary hearing feels surreal. I'm standing in our kitchen at 5 a.m., mechanically spreading peanut butter on bread for Emma's lunch, even though she won't be at school today. Jake comes up behind me, gently taking the knife from my hand. She'll be eating at my parents' house, he reminds me softly. Remember? They're watching her during the hearing. I nod, trying to focus. Right, sorry. I trail off, unable to find words for the storm of emotions churning inside me. I know, Jake says, pulling me into his arms, but we're going to get through this. Emma is going to be okay. I want to believe him, but the weight of what lies ahead feels crushing. In just a few hours, the details of what happened in that closet will be laid bare in a courtroom, and Emma might have to face the woman who hurt her. The courthouse is swarming with news vans when we arrive. Reporters thrust microphones toward us as we make our way up the steps, shouting questions that blur together into white noise. Jake keeps his arm firmly around my shoulders, guiding me through the crowd. Inside, Rachel is already waiting, her face tight with tension. Marcus sits beside her, small and hunched in his chair, eyes fixed on the floor. Rachel gives me a quick hug. They're bringing in Coco today, she whispers, the therapy dog for the kids' testimony. I nod gratefully. Emma has been practicing with Dr. Landry, talking about what happened while petting a stuffed dog. The real therapy dog should help keep her grounded. The courtroom fills quickly. Parents from our support group file in, along with teachers from the school, administrators, and curious onlookers. The air feels thick with anticipation and dread. When Miss Patty is let in, I feel physically ill. She looks nothing like the warm, grandmotherly teacher who greeted children each morning. Her face is set in hard lines, eyes cold and calculating as they sweep the room. When her gaze meets mine, there's no remorse, only contempt. The prosecution presents their opening statement, laying out the horrific details discovered in that supply closet. The photos of the restraint chair are displayed on a screen, and I hear gasps from the gallery. Then come the files Miss Patty's meticulous documentation of her abuse. The defendant maintained detailed records of her actions, the prosecutor explains, her voice steady but filled with controlled outrage. Each child had a file containing photographs of injuries inflicted during what she called learning time, along with notes on the duration and supposed justification for each punishment session. Miss Patty's attorney argues that the evidence has been misinterpreted, that the restraints were for safety during sensory breaks for disruptive children. He claims the bruises documented in the photos occurred during normal playground activities, not from abuse. Children bruise easily, he tells the court. Miss Holloway was simply documenting incidents that occurred during regular play to protect herself from exactly this kind of misunderstanding. I dig my fingernails into my palms to keep from screaming at the blatant lies. The most damning evidence comes when they play the audio recordings found in the closet, the sound of a child crying, begging to be let go. Miss Patty's voice, cold and clinical. 5 more minutes for making noise. You know the rules. I close my eyes, unable to look at Miss Patty as her own voice condemns her. When I open them again, I see several jurors wiping away tears. During a recess, our lawyer informs us that Emma will testify after lunch. My stomach knots with anxiety. Dr. Landry has prepared her as much as possible, but she's still just 5 years old, facing the woman who terrorized her. She doesn't have to look at Miss Patty, the lawyer assures me. We've arranged the seating so she can focus on you and the therapy dog. When the time comes, Emma walks into the courtroom holding Dr. Landry's hand. Coco, a gentle golden retriever with patient eyes, walks beside her. Emma's wearing her favorite dress, the one with butterflies, and her hair is neatly braided. She looks impossibly small in the witness chair. The prosecutor approaches slowly, speaking in a gentle voice. Emma, do you know the difference between telling the truth and telling a lie? Emma nods, one hand buried in Coco's fur. The truth is what really happened. A lie is making up something that didn't happen. That's right. And do you promise to tell the truth today? I promise, Emma says solemnly. Carefully, the prosecutor guides Emma through her testimony. What happened during learning time? Where did Miss Patty take her? What happened in the darkroom? Emma's voice is small but clear as she describes being taken to the closet when she wasn't learning right, how Miss Patty would make her sit in the chair and hold her arms down if she tried to move, how it hurt when Miss Patty squeezed her arms to make her be quiet. She said if I told anyone she would know, and next time would be worse, Emma says, her eyes filling with tears. She said nobody would believe me anyway because I was just a noisy kid. I can barely breathe through my rage and grief. Jake's hand finds mine, squeezing so hard it hurts, but I welcome the pain. It gives me something to focus on besides the overwhelming urge to lunge across the courtroom at Miss Patty. During cross-examination, Miss Patty's attorney tries to confuse Emma, suggesting she's mixing up normal classroom activities with something else. Emma Emma starts to look uncertain, her eyes darting to me in confusion. Isn't it possible, the defense attorney asks, that you're just remembering a time when Miss Patty had to help you calm down because you were having a tantrum? Emma's lower lip trembles. Coco nudges her hand, and Emma takes a deep breath. She says finally, "That's not what happened. Learning time was in the dark room with a chair. It hurt, and she took pictures after." The defense attorney tries another approach. "Emma, has your mommy talked to you a lot about Miss Patty? Has she told you what to say today?" Before the prosecutor can object, Emma shakes her head firmly. "Mommy just said to tell the truth. The truth is Miss Patty hurt me and the other kids." When Emma is finally excused, she runs straight to me. I wrap my arms around her, burying my face in her hair so she won't see my tears. "You did so well," I whisper. "I'm so proud of you." Jake takes Emma home while I stay for the rest of the testimony. Marcus testifies next, with Coco still by his side. Unlike Emma, he refuses to look in Miss Patty's direction at all, turning his entire body away from her. His testimony is similar to Emma's, but he adds details that make my skin crawl. How Miss Patty would sometimes record them crying, then play it back to show them how ugly they sounded. How she would tell them their parents wouldn't want them anymore if they knew how bad they were at learning to be quiet. The day's final witness is the school principal, Mr. Hargrove. Under oath, he finally admits what we've suspected all along. There were complaints about Miss Patty, multiple complaints, spanning years. 3 parents approached me with concerns about unexplained bruises, he confesses, unable to meet anyone's eyes. And Miss Taylor, another teacher, reported hearing crying from Miss Patty's classroom during odd hours. "What did you do with these reports?" the prosecutor asks. I spoke to Miss Patty. She always had explanations that seemed reasonable. She'd been teaching for 20 years with an exemplary record. I didn't think— You didn't think what, Mr. Hargrove? That a veteran teacher could be abusing children right under your nose? He has no answer for that. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarm again. Rachel pulls me aside as we try to navigate through the crowd. "Have you seen the news? The school board president resigned this morning. They found emails where he told Hargrove to handle the Patty situation quietly after that grandmother complained last year." I'm not surprised. The entire system failed these children, not just Miss Patty. That evening, I hold Emma extra tight as I tuck her into bed. "You were so brave today," I tell her. "Was Marcus brave too?" she asks sleepily. "Yes, he was very brave, and so were the other children who told their stories." Emma is quiet for a moment, her small fingers tracing patterns on her blanket. "Mom, the judge is going to make sure Miss Patty can't hurt any more kids, right? That's what we're all working for, sweetheart, and your bravery today helped make that happen." She nods, satisfied with this answer, and drifts off to sleep. I stay watching her long after her breathing deepens, marveling at her resilience. The hearing continues for 3 more days. Other teachers testify about the locked closet, about children returning from learning time with red eyes and subdued behavior. The prosecution presents their final bombshell: evidence of 15 children abused over 3 years, all documented in Miss Patty's own meticulous records. Throughout it all, Miss Patty sits stone-faced, occasionally whispering to her attorney, but showing no reaction to the testimony against her. Not once does she look at the children she hurt or their parents. It's as if we're all merely inconveniences in her life, not human beings she damaged. On the final day of the hearing, the judge rules that there is more than sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Miss Patty pleads not guilty to all charges, and trial dates are set for the fall. As we leave the courthouse for the last time, Rachel links her arm through mine. "This is just the beginning," she says, "but we've already won something important. People know the truth now." I look back at the courthouse steps, where reporters are interviewing other parents from our support group. The story is everywhere now. No more secrets, no more silence. Whatever happens next, Miss Patty's reign of terror is truly over, and Emma, my brave little girl, is sleeping without nightmares for the first time in months. The courtroom is absolutely silent as the jury files back in. I've been holding my breath for so long that my chest aches. Jake's hand finds mine, squeezing so tight I can feel my wedding ring pressing into my skin. Rachel sits on my other side, her body rigid with tension. 3 days of deliberation, 3 days of waiting, 3 days of Emma asking every night, did they decide if Miss Patty is going to jail? The judge asks if the jury has reached a verdict, and the foreman, a middle-aged man with kind eyes who watched Emma's testimony with undisguised horror, stands. "We have, Your Honor." Miss Patty sits at the defense table, her face a mask of indifference. Throughout the entire trial, she's shown no emotion, no remorse, not even when faced with the evidence of her own meticulous documentation of abuse. She stares straight ahead now, as if none of this concerns her. "On the count of child abuse in the first degree, how do you find?" "We find the defendant guilty." A collective exhale ripples through the courtroom. Rachel's hand flies to her mouth, stifling a sob. "On the count of false imprisonment of a minor, how do you find?" "Guilty." Miss Patty's attorney places a hand on her arm, but she shrugs it off, her expression hardening. One by one, the foreman reads through all 27 counts. "Guilty, guilty, guilty." Each one feels like another brick being removed from the weight that's been crushing my chest for months. When the judge thanks the jury for their service, Miss Patty finally shows emotion, a flash of anger that transforms her face into something ugly and frightening. I think of Emma seeing that expression in the dark closet, and my stomach turns. Sentencing is scheduled for the following week. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarm us, microphones thrust in our faces. Jake shields me from the worst of it, but I hear their questions anyway. How does it feel knowing justice has been served? Has it though? The children still wake with nightmares. The system that enabled Miss Patty still exists. The principal who ignored complaints still collects his pension while on administrative leave. Rachel and I give a brief statement that we've carefully prepared. Today's verdict is just the beginning, Rachel says, her voice steady despite the tears tears in her eyes. No child should ever experience what our children endured. We won't rest until every safeguard is in place to prevent this from happening again. That night, I sit on Emma's bed, watching her arrange her stuffed animals in a protective circle around her pillow, a habit she developed after the abuse came to light. "Mommy, is Miss Patty going to jail forever?" she asks, her small fingers smoothing the fur on her favorite teddy bear. "For a very long time," I tell her. "She won't be able to hurt you or any other children again." Emma considers this, her face serious. "Good, but what about the other kids who might have mean teachers? Who's going to help them?" Her question haunts me as I lie awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Who indeed? The sentencing hearing is smaller, more subdued. Miss Patty sits stone-faced as victim impact statements are read. Rachel speaks about Marcus's continuing nightmares, how he still can't bear to be in small spaces. Other parents describe children who now flinch at raised voices, who've regressed in toilet training, who panic at the sight of classroom closets. When it's my turn, I stand with shaking legs and unfold the paper I've rewritten a dozen times. My daughter was 5 years old when Miss Patty began systematically terrorizing her. I begin, my voice surprisingly steady. Emma used to skip into school each morning. Now, she checks every room for exits before she'll enter. She was taught to be afraid of making noise, any noise, because learning time meant punishment for being a child. I look directly at Miss Patty for the first time. The physical bruises have healed, but the emotional ones remain. Emma still asks me if she's being too noisy when she laughs. She still checks closet doors to make sure they're not locked. These are burdens no child should carry. Miss Patty's expression never changes. It's as if she's listening to a mildly boring lecture rather than the consequences of her actions. Then something unexpected happens. Emma, who's been sitting quietly with Jake, stands up. "Your Honor," her small voice carries through the hushed courtroom. "Can I say something too?" The judge looks startled but nods. "Of course, young lady." Jake starts to rise, but Emma shakes her head. She walks to the front of the courtroom alone, her butterfly barrette catching the light. She stands before the judge, her back straight, and turns to face Miss Patty directly. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she says clearly. "You told me nobody would believe me, but they did. You told me I was bad, but I'm not. You're the bad one." Miss Patty finally shows emotion. A flicker of shock crosses her face before she can suppress it. Emma continues, her voice growing stronger. "I don't have to be quiet anymore. I can laugh and talk and sing, and nobody puts me in a dark room for it." The courtroom is utterly silent. Even the court reporter has paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. "I'm not afraid anymore," Emma repeats, and then walks back to Jake, who wraps her in his arms, tears streaming down his face. The judge sentences Miss Patty to 20 years without possibility of parole, the maximum allowed. As she's led away in handcuffs, she finally looks back at us, not with remorse, but with cold hatred that makes my blood freeze. Outside, I kneel to Emma's level. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," I tell her, my voice thick with emotion. "I am so proud of you." She smiles, a real smile that reaches her eyes. I just wanted to tell her she can't scare me anymore. 1 year later, Emma skips into her new school, waving goodbye without a backward glance. She's in first grade now, at a different school district with smaller class sizes and transparent classroom doors. Her new teacher, Mr. Gonzalez, greets each child by name and high-fives Emma as she enters. She's thriving, her therapist tells us during our monthly check-in. The nightmares have decreased significantly, and her drawings show remarkable progress. She shows us Emma's latest artwork, a bright classroom filled with smiling children, a stark contrast to the dark closets and angry red scribbles of a year ago. Rachel and I meet weekly now, not to strategize about court cases, but to develop our new advocacy organization, Voices for School Safety. What began as two terrified mothers comparing notes has grown into a statewide network of parents, educators, and mental health professionals working to prevent educational abuse. The superintendent's trial starts next month, Rachel reminds me, as we finalize the agenda for our upcoming workshop. "Are you ready to testify again?" I nod. The investigation revealed that the superintendent had received direct complaints about Miss Patty from 3 different schools over her career. Each time, he'd moved her to a new location rather than addressing the allegations. The criminal negligence charges against him and the principal are just the beginning of accountability. Our advocacy work led directly to the state legislature taking up Emma's Law, a comprehensive bill requiring immediate investigation of all abuse allegations in educational settings, mandatory reporting, training for all school employees, and transparent complaint procedures for parents. Emma sits with me at the kitchen table the night before the legislative hearing, carefully coloring a picture for the lawmakers. "Is this good, Mom?" she asks, holding up her drawing. It shows a row of children holding hands, standing in front of a school with sunshine streaming through the windows. "I want them to know what school should feel like. It's perfect," I tell her, marveling at how far we've come. The next day, Emma sits beside me at the hearing, her legs swinging beneath a chair as legislators discuss the bill named after her. When it's my turn to speak, I begin with Miss Patty's own words. Noisy learners protocol. That's what she called her system for abusing children who behaved like children. She documented every bruise, every tear, every moment of terror she inflicted. The system failed these children at every level, from the classroom to the superintendent's office. I gesture to Emma beside me. This is what courage looks like. A child brave enough to speak truth to power, even when the adults around her failed to protect her. Emma's Law will ensure that when a child like my daughter says something is wrong, we listen. When a teacher like Miss Taylor reports concerns, we investigate. When a parent notices unexplained bruises, we act. The bill passes unanimously the following week. Emma turns 7 in the spring. We have her birthday party at the park, with classmates from her new school and children from our support group. Marcus is there, still quiet but smiling more often now. Rachel brings a cake big enough for all 20 children who attend. As Emma opens her gifts, surrounded by friends, I catch her watching a younger child who's crying after falling off the swing. Emma excuses herself from her presence, walks over, and kneels beside the little girl. "It's okay to cry," I hear her say gently. "Nobody's going to put you in a dark room for making noise. I promise." The little girl looks up, sniffling. "Really?" Emma nods solemnly. "Really. And if anyone ever tries to hurt you or make you keep secrets, you tell a grown-up right away. That's how you help other kids too." Later, as we're loading gifts into the car, Emma helps me carry a stack of presents. "Mom," she says, her voice thoughtful, "I think I helped other kids by telling, didn't I?" I set down the packages and kneel to look her in the eyes. "You absolutely did, sweetheart. You helped more children than you'll ever know." She smiles, satisfied, and skips ahead to the car, calling back over her shoulder, "Race you, Daddy." Jake pretends to run in slow motion, letting Emma win easily. Her laughter, loud, uninhibited, joyful, rings through the parking lot. That sound, I think, watching her victory dance by the car, is what justice really sounds like.